Hello, and welcome to Week 3, Unit 1 of Application Development for SAP Business by Design. In this unit, we'll be looking at generating screens. When we talk about screens in SAP Business by Design, we basically call them floor plans. It's the design time term that we use when we refer to the screens themselves. And there are a number of floor plans that exist within the application. There is, by default, at the very top, a work center. The work center is what you usually see along the top. It says new business, sales orders, business partner data. It's kind of the main areas of navigation. Below those are work center views, and there's a number of views that exist. One view may exist in multiple places. It depends on what that view is used for and if it's relevant for different sections, but you might see it in different work centers. And these are screens that are needed. They basically set up the navigation, but there's not much that we design them. The other ones that we'll actually really design are in the following list here. So first, if we look at it, there's an object instance floor plan, an OIF. An OIF is a full detailed view of a particular business object. It shows all of the information about it and will also be editable. So if you click the View All button somewhere, for example, and you'll see a large screen come up, that's the OIF that's there. So for a sales order, for example, it's a very large business object. You would see all the information about the sales order, the header info, the item info, document flow, for example. OIF would contain all this kinds of information. Next up is the Quick Activity Floor Plan, or the QAF. A QAF is also an editable screen, but it's only a summary of info, a brief bit of info about a particular business object. The QAF would have some header data, maybe a brief view of the items, usually things like description, status, stuff like that, but not the full details of it. It's a very brief screen. And the same goes for the next one, the fact sheet. A fact sheet is also a brief, detailed screen of an object, but it's read-only, so it's not editable. So kind of the opposite of a QAF. One's editable, one's not. But the fact sheet also just shows a summary of data of a particular business object. Next up is the object work list, the OWL. The OWL is the list view of a particular object. So when you go to a work center, you say sales orders and click on the sales orders view, you'll see a list of sales orders come up. You can search through sales orders, filter them. This is the OWL that you're viewing at that point in time. So a list view of whatever instances are there. And then also I want to point out the object value selector, an OVS. An OVS is basically a search help. So if you're creating a sales order and you want to select an employee responsible, you would click that button, a little search help comes up that allows you to search for employees and select one to assign as the employee responsible. Well, that screen that comes up is the OVS. It's a search help that we can provide for a particular business object to be reused in a number of different screens. So these screens, all of them comprise and come together to basically make what the user sees when they're using the application. It'll give them all the places to find instances that they want to work with, create new ones, maintain them in some form of fashion here. Now what's the flow here of these screens? So there's a predefined UI paradigm that's in place with these. A flow that's set already, and what that is we've kind of touched base on it before, but as I mentioned before, there's always a work center at the top. You always have to know what kind of main area you're navigating to, and from there into a work center view. Now from the view, you're usually going to see an OWL, the list view, and that makes sense, right? I wouldn't go directly to the OIF, let's say, to see details of an instance, because what instance would I want to see at that particular time? The OWL is basically the right place to go because it says here's what instances already exist. You're welcome to create a new one from here or edit or view an existing one. And so it makes sense that we navigate directly to the OWL from any other screen. Now from the OWL we can go to any number of screens. From there we can go to the fact sheet if we want to just view some details about that object, or to the QAF to view and also edit some details of it. And then we could even go to the OIF, where we would see all the details of it, again be able to edit it. You'll notice that even the OIF, we can get to it from the fact sheet or the QAF as well. These are the screens where you'd see a View All button in the top right, where if I click on that, that also navigates to the OIF. So that makes sense, right? If we're in a summary view of an object and I wanted to view all the data, I would click the View All, and that would then obviously want to navigate me to an OIF. So this is the typical flow of all the screens that are here, the floor plans that we want to use within the application. And we're always going to want to follow the screen scenario when we're developing our screens. And the tool itself, the SAP Cloud Application Studio, helps us follow this. It enables us to try and follow this. And that when it comes to actually generating our floor plans. Now when we go to generate our floor plans in the studio, you'll see it gives us a really easy way to generate them for our business objects. We can easily go in there and say generate any number of these screens, whether it's one of them or all of them. And these screens will contain details as far as the fields that are in our object, actions that are defined. It tries to help look at what our business object is that we're creating the screens on, and then represent those meaningfully within the newly generated floor plan. And then after that, we can use what's called the UI designer to enhance these screens and further clean them up. The UI designer is the tool that we use to actually change and modify screens. And it was installed automatically when we installed the SAP Cloud Application Studio. So let's go ahead and go into the studio and generate our screens right now. So you can see I'm logged into the SAP Cloud Application Studio with my development user. I again have my solution open, and here's my bonus object plan. So far we've just defined the object and some actions and events on my root node. I can right click on my bonus object, my bonus plan object, and again I see a large list of create items. You'll notice as we go through that there's a lot of things that we can trigger just by right clicking on our business object. So we already used the create script files. For now I'm going to say create screens. And it's going to give me a little pop-up here. It tells me what's the business object that's available to me that I'm creating these screens on. It's already pre-filled with bonus plans since we right-clicked on the object to do this. It also tells me the screen name. This is a technical name that we'll use behind the scenes here. We're going to leave it at bonus plan for now. What are the supported devices for these screens? So we can create screens not only for desktop, but also desktop and tablet, or mobile only. And basically what this does is it modifies what's called a tag property in these screens. We'll point it out later. But the tag property basically says what device it's supported for, and what that happens is when I assign these screens to a business user, and they log in with whatever device it might be, let's say mobile, for example, a smartphone, it's going to look and say what screens are assigned to this user that have the mobile tag. And for those, go ahead and show them to the user in the application. Same with desktop. When you log in with your desktop computer, it looks to see with your user what screens are assigned that have a desktop tag to it, or desktop and tablet. And then we'll be able to show those. So this is how we can start to separate between the normal screens in the desktop and mobile screens. But we'll get to mobility later on. You'll also see screen type. I can generate any number of screens that I want that we've just talked about. So I can say just an OIF and an OWL if I want to. I could do more. But what we're going to do is use this last one, screen scenario with navigation. And this is really nice for us because it generates all of these screens for us and actually builds the navigation between them. If I had generated these screens separately using the screen type above, I would have to build that navigation myself. I would have to say that, well, when you go from an OWL and say view, that it should go to a fact sheet, and then the view all should go to an OIF, etc., etc. And I could do that, but it just takes up more time, and it's not really necessary. And the tool, the SAP Cloud Application Studio, is going to generate that for us. So it's already automatically there. I'm going to give it a short ID. It's a technical ID used for the screens when they're created, and say OK. So now it's going to go through and generate these screens for me. You'll notice one other file here too. It's a PTP file, port type package. And this file actually contains all the navigation data for our screens. So when we say that you can go to our OIF through a particular entry point, that detail is stored in the PTP file. And it creates all of this for us. So it's nice that we don't have to manage it ourselves. We actually really won't even touch the port type package file. Even as we define new entry points and navigations between our screens, the framework will automatically maintain this PTP file for us. You'll also notice in the generated screens here, there's no fact sheet that it creates for us by default. What happens is it'll use the QIF and then will provide two different ways to navigate to the screen whether the screen should be read-only or editable, and then we can manage that within the screen itself. So we were able to generate our screens for our floor plans for our object. And in the next unit, we'll go ahead and we'll use the UI designer to actually fine-tune and clean up these screens. They're usable now. I could assign them to a business user and they could create and maintain data, but they're not going to be clean and have the search helps and things that we actually want users to have. So for now, we've generated our screens. In the next unit, we'll go ahead and fine-tune them and make them ready for productive use. Thank you.